All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Michigan Outdoors Report Live. It's Wednesday night, 7 o'clock, and we have a special guest with us tonight. Bob Jones is joining us. He's president of the Michigan Bowhunters Association. He's also a member of the Lower Peninsula Deer Advisory Team. And there's some big things happening tomorrow. So we're going to get into the Michigan Bowhunters Association, and we'll also talk some deer regs with Bob here, too. We've been very fortunate to have Jordan, who is chair on the UP Deer Advisory Team. So we've been very fortunate to get a lot of insight, behind the scenes look there, and especially the Upper Peninsula, um, things that they're working towards up that way. So it's nice to get a different perspective, and then also that Lower Peninsula feel there too. So Bob, we're glad to have you on tonight. Of course, with us tonight also, we have Dennis joining us from Southeast Michigan. Dennis, what's going on? What have you been up to? I mean, I know, but why don't you let everybody else know? I'm sure your arms are sore.
Well, yeah, my arms are extremely sore from holding a big frozen bird in the frozen food section at the grocery store the other day. I don't know if you guys seen that video or not, but yeah, other than that, just been killing the crappies, man. Killing the crappies since turkey season's been over. That's all I've been doing.
Yeah, they're coming in pretty good right now from what you've been showcasing on the page and everything. So Southeast Michigan, it sounds like the crappie bite is on pretty good there, huh?
It's getting there. They're staging right now. I'm thinking these water temperatures need another good solid week. If we get the weather that we're supposed to get, yeah, that bite's gonna be crazy. There shouldn't be any reason I shouldn't be going down and getting a limit every day. Right now, it's kind of been hit and miss. The weather's just been back and forth. Can't make up its mind what it wants to do. As soon as it starts getting good, front comes in dead for a day, day and a half, and then it starts picking back up again.
Hey, right. Well, yeah, I know you guys have had a lot warmer weather down there, and I'm sure the water temperatures are far above what we have up here in
Yeah,
the northern lower. So, yeah, I've just been out still cleaning up from that ice storm. It's been a little over a month, and man, it's still just a mess up here. So, I've been out cutting wood, and I still have quite a bit left to cut. So, that's what I'll be working on. So, again, welcome Bob Jones tonight from Michigan Bowhunters Association. He's the president. Bob, how are you tonight?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for joining us. So Bob, you live down there in Lapeer County, which is in the thumb for those of you that don't know your Michigan geography. So Bob, just if you could start, tell us a little bit about yourself, especially that hunting and fishing career. How'd you get started, and how'd you end up to where you're at today?
I was really fortunate as a kid. Actually, I'll be 62 this later this year, and last year was my 50th bow hunting season. Um, I tell a story. My mom and dad hauled me off to the archery course when I was probably 4 or 5 years old. Put a bow in my hand and told me I'd like it, and here I am, nearly 60 years later, still liking it. So I shot competitive archery for a number of years. Traveled all around the country shooting and world championships, national championships, indoors and outdoors. Um, I grew up down in Sterling Heights, and my dad was very much involved with Detroit Sportsman's Congress. If you've ever heard of that, Sportsman's Association down there, and that's where I grew up. And I don't know, probably 17 years ago or so, went back to my roots, and I went back to strictly traditional archery. I hunt all with longbows and recurves now. And in that time, I've still managed to shoot about 30 whitetails, a couple of elk, a couple of antelope, mule deer, I think 5 turkeys. So still out there a lot, very, very much involved in the traditional archery community. Belong to Michigan Traditional Bow Hunters, Compton Traditional Bow Hunters, Michigan Longbow Association, and I pretty much at a shoot somewhere just about every weekend all summer long. We're out shooting arrows, so it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah, I was gonna say I see a traditional bow behind you, and so that's your weapon of choice. So just out of curiosity, Oh yeah, you got several there. Do
Yeah,
you
you can't have
firearm
just one.
or
Do I firearm hunt? Yes, I still do. The last 2 seasons, I didn't really sit out. My dad last hunting season was 89 years old, and the year before he was 88. And I pretty much sat with him in the blind, helped him out, got him out, and um, plus I was pretty fortunate. Shot an elk last year in Idaho with my bow. I've shot 2 moose. Those were both shot with a gun in the last 6, 7 years. I'm not hurting for meat in the freezer, so I can be pretty selective and if I had to give up gun hunting, I could. But bow hunting's my first love, and quite often I'll take my bow out during the rifle season. Just the only thing that changes is I put an orange hat on.
right? Right. Well, that's pretty awesome. That is something I have a traditional bow. I've got to start practicing with that, and I know it's a lot of instinct and just a lot of practice with that. So I might have to hit you up for some pointers once I get going here.
I'd be happy to help you out. And just to give a little plug to my club back in your hometown, Lapeer County Sportsman's Club puts on one of the biggest traditional shoots in the state. So last weekend in August each year, we'll have over 200 people there for dinner Saturday night. Bow giveaways, over 100 Reinhardt targets set out. We cooked 185-pound pig last year and an 80-pound beef round, and they were gone at the end of the night. So we put on quite a feast Saturday night. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that definitely, if I can show up for some barbecue, I'll be there. That's pretty cool. So Bob, you're here tonight on behalf of Michigan Bowhunters Association, which you're the president of. So, if you could give the audience an overview of Michigan Bowhunters Association, kind of the foundation, where it got started, and what it's really all about, what you guys work for.
Well, Michigan Bowhunters was chartered in 1946, but the real story of Michigan Bowhunters actually starts about 15 years earlier than that. The oldest organization that we have in the state of Michigan was formed in 1923, the oldest sportsman's, and it was a Michigan Archers Association. And back in the late 1920s, early 1930s, there was a group of bow hunters that, even though our hunting regulations did not say you could hunt with archery equipment during the firearm season, it didn't specifically say you couldn't. And Fred Bear, Nels Grumley, who was Fred's bowyer, A.J. Michelson, who went on to be part of the National Archery Association, they were some of the guys that hunted up in the Upper Peninsula up around Blaney Park. And it actually took Fred Bear 6 years before he harvested his first buck up there. And back then you couldn't shoot antlerless deer. So it was on his 6th year of hunting up there. Then in 1935, the bow hunters, that small group of bow hunters, and it had been growing through the years a little bit, petitioned the legislative body, because back then it wasn't controlled by the DNR, to get a separate archery season, or at least allow the usage of archery equipment. And they were told that until they could prove that archery was a bow and arrow at that time, what they were using, all recurves and longbows, was suitable for harvesting a deer ethically, they wouldn't grant it. And they gave them a challenge to pass an arrow through a 3/16-inch steel boilerplate. They accomplished that in 1936. And in 1937, we had our first archery season, and it ran for 14 days, the 1st of November through the 14th of November. And it was a separate season. There was 168 hunters and 3 deer harvested. Quite a big difference from what we have today. But, that's really morphed into what we know it today. But through the years, Michigan Bowhunters has been an advocate. The ability to hunt from an elevated stand, that was due to Michigan Bowhunters' efforts. Prior to 1970, I believe it was 74 or 75, you couldn't hunt from an elevated stand, and Michigan Bowhunters got that passed. The ability to harvest an antlerless deer during the separate archery season, which seems unheard of now with the problems we have down here in the Lower Peninsula with deer densities, but it wasn't like that back then. we let's see, the separate doe, the ability to shoot rough fish, shooting carp, and that's resulted, that single act alone has resulted in millions of pounds of rough fish being taken out of the Great Lakes, which has greatly helped our fisheries as well as our hunting opportunities. Oh gosh, excuse me. We helped craft the language for those with disabilities to use crossbows originally before they were full inclusion. They've been involved with roadside cleanups. We've sponsored numerous schools through the years for the National Archery in the Schools program. Literally put tens, if not hundreds of thousands of bows in people's hands for their first experience shooting a bow and arrow through the years. We set up at Outdoor Ammo with the kids event. We set up for two different events for Safari Club International. Jake's Day over at Williams Gun Sight in Davison. We set up and do a youth archery event there. So we're all about creating opportunities, and not just in archery, but in bow hunting as well. And we've been involved legislatively for our whole 80 years of existence. So.
Okay. So yeah, it sounds like conservation and preservation and helping establish some guidelines, rules, regulations over the years. So exactly how did you get involved? What was that first step? And if you could kind of talk through your progression in Michigan Bowhunters for us.
I was a member years ago when I became 18 years old. I had to buy my own license or my own membership because I no longer fell under my dad's. And then just because I was busy raising kids and stuff, I wasn't actively involved with Michigan Bowhunters. As I said, I was shooting target archery for, I don't know, pretty close to 4 decades, shooting all over the country. And then I ended up joining Lapeer County Sportsman's Club. They asked me if I was a member of NBH. They got a pretty big following up there. And so I joined. I instantly became a lieutenant governor. That was probably about 20 years ago, give or take a few years. And ended up as governor of District 6, which is basically the thumb area. I was governor for 6-8 years. Then I stepped up to vice president's job, and now I'm currently president. So I just finished my first term as president in April, and I'm on my second term now. And I'll be term limited out. We can only do 2 terms back to back. So in April of 2027 is when this term will expire.
Okay. So talk about the future of Michigan Bowhunters. What are the things that Michigan Bowhunters is working towards, as we look down the road? A lot of great things done in the past and present. What is the goal moving forward?
My goals might not align with what might be popular, but I think it's time that some of the elephants in the room get addressed. Michigan Bowhunters wasn't on board for full inclusion of the crossbow, and that's something that's going to have to be part of the discussion going forward. The crossbows of today are not what were yesterday or 16 years ago when they were brought on board. And this is a discussion that's starting to take place in some other states right now, actually. And we're not going to make them go away. And Michigan Bowhunters isn't going to ask for that either. But when we start looking at the harvest dynamics of the crossbow versus anything, even the compound, we have history going back prior to full inclusion of the crossbow. Archers contributed about 25%, no less than 25% of the antlerless harvest and of the antlered harvest both. We were pretty consistent. We were pretty equal balanced in our overall harvest. Since full inclusion of the crossbow, in 2024, it was up around 35% of the bucks harvested, and we dropped down into the teens for antlerless harvest. When you give that tool that long of a time period, a full 45 days in October and the first 2 weeks in November, it certainly changes the harvest dynamic. what I would like to see them do is and this isn't anything that's been talked about the department or anything. This is what I think could be part of the discussion into 2026 in the DAT, because they're going to go to, there's going to be a lot of conversation next year looking at a $1, making Michigan a $1 state. And there is some data out there showing, if you compare that to Ohio, who has a $1 tag, but you can't just cherry pick one regulation or one piece of a regulation. You got to look at the whole package. If you look at Ohio, their gun opener doesn't open until around Thanksgiving time. It's not during the peak of the rut, or it's more towards the tail end of the rut. But their gun season is 5 days long, and their muzzleloader season is 5 days long, and the rest of their harvest is antlerless and archery. Well, if you're going to have that conversation and you're going to ask the gun hunters to have less opportunity, I think you really need to address the crossbow as well and see if that needs less opportunity. If the goal is to save more bucks and put more bucks on the landscape, you have to talk about it all. I'm not saying it'll go anywhere. I can say that I'll bring up that conversation, but I don't think a $1 regulation in and of itself is going to solve anything. There were roughly 20,000 people last year. That was information from the department that shot $2 in 2024. Even if all 20,000 of those hunters switched and they shot $1 and one doe, which won't happen because you still have a huge portion of the population that just under no circumstances will they shoot a doe. They can see 80 does a night and they refuse to take one. And that mindset needs to change. You know, that's something that through education, we really got to push the narrative on how important it is to have a more balanced sex ratio. And you're never going to get that when you clobber the bucks for the number of days that we do and refuse to shoot antlerless deer. So those are some of the things that will be talked about in the DAT in 2026. The Lower Peninsula, even though I wasn't in favor of it as a standalone resolution, that actually came out of the Lower Peninsula DAT to go to $1. There's some things in statute that don't allow that to take place. I'm sure you guys are aware of right now. There's got to be some legislative changes and stuff to make that happen.
Okay. So before we really start to shift gears and kind of get into the regs and like I said, tomorrow is kind of a big day for all that. If someone wanted to join the Michigan Bowhunters Association, how do they go about doing that? And are there fees, or like what can they expect out of a membership?
Well, out of a membership, yes, it's $35 a year, and we just recently raised that by $5. It went up actually May 1st. We hated to do it, but with all the costs going up, it cost us quite a bit of money to mail our magazine, just normal operating costs, the awards that we give away each year to our members. Most of those are funded through our banquet and our Michigan Bowhunter Rendezvous, which is up in Harrison at the Clare County Fairgrounds. Those are our two biggest fundraisers for the year. Those pretty much keep the doors open, but well, I got sidetracked there. Old age setting in. Yeah, there's fees. Oh, they can go online if they Google Michigan Bowhunters, it'll come up. We have a web page, and they can sign up there online, or they can come to one of our events. We've got our spring shoots coming up at Oakland County Sportsman's Club, actually down here in Zone 10, District 10. Not this coming up weekend, but the following weekend, and that's a free shoot for members. If people wanted to come out and join that day, they could shoot that weekend for free. So they'd get a reduction on their shooting fees, about 50% off. So you could join at that shoot. We do an annual carp shoot every year. You could join there. We're at Outdoorama. Like I said, we're very exposed throughout the year. Woods and Waters, plenty of opportunities. We have booths set up. And stop by and see us. Be happy to sign you up.
Okay. All right, so a lot of different opportunities, whether it be in person at events or check them out on their website. Like Bob said, you can Google them, Michigan Bowhunters Association. Their website should pop up there if you want to see more information about who they are, what they do, and what they're doing throughout the state, and possibly join a membership there. So, Bob, let's transition a little bit here, and I'm sure this is what a lot of people are wanting to talk about tonight. So you are part of the Lower Peninsula Deer Advisory Team. Um, were you part of the DMI? And for those watching at home, that's the Deer Management Initiative, and then it transitioned to DAT. So if you could just talk about how long you've been part of the Deer Advisory Team, and how'd you get in that position? What made you want to step up and be a part of this?
To answer your first question, yes, I was on the DMI, and I also was the only member of the DMI. I actually, as it turned out, I served on both the Lower Peninsula DMI and the Upper Peninsula DMI, due to our member that lives in the UP. He attended all the virtual meetings, but when it came time for the in-person meeting, he was basically threatened with his job that if you take off, you're not going to have a job when you get back. So I ended up going to the Upper Peninsula. But as president of the organization, I kept very much in touch of what was going on in the UP. So it was a good fit for me to go up there. And I spent countless hours on the phone with Jordan Hoover during that time, keeping abreast of what was going on in the UP. And, I was like a lot of guys. I'm going to be honest with you. Prior to the DMI, I probably would have told you that the wolves ate all the deer up there. And as you start getting into all the education that they gave us during the DMI, there's, as Jordan will tell you, there's no doubt that the predator load up there certainly contributes to decline in some deer numbers, but it's not the biggest issue up there. The biggest issue up there is habitat destruction. The winter deer complexes aren't what they used to be. And this is something that should have been boots on the ground, in progress, working on 25 years ago. It's going to take a monumental task now to turn that habitat back around in the northern portion of the state. So
yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, Dennis, did you have something?
What's that?
Go ahead, Bob.
My path, you asked how I got on the DMI and on the Deer Advisory Team. As a stakeholder president, we were one of the stakeholders that we've got a long-standing history with the department and stuff. So we were asked to be on the advisory team. I was there as one of the stakeholder groups.
Okay. So what is talking with Jordan, we have a good perspective of what the Deer Advisory Team is, and so a collection of like-minded individuals all working towards hopefully a positive solution to help help the deer numbers flourish in the right way. If you could just give us a look to the Lower Peninsula Deer Advisory Team, like how many members are there, and what do your meetings look like, and what as a team, what kind of things are you guys pushing and hoping to achieve out of this?
Well, the membership, there's 18 people currently on the Lower Peninsula DAT. I would say that there's a few individuals whose main purpose and main focus is baiting. They really want baiting brought back, and that's their big push is baiting. There's also quite a handful of people there. I won't say they have a trophy mindset, but they certainly put a lot of emphasis on what we need to do to grow bigger bucks in Michigan. There's a lot of talk about antler point restrictions, going to one buck to save some of the bucks. I'm not so sure I'm in alignment with that, even though I kind of practice APRs myself. I'm not in favor of telling another hunter how to hunt his hunt, and a lot of those guys are gun hunters, and I look at everything from a bow hunting perspective. If I got a quarter square mile of property and it's ag land, and I plopped a tower blind right in the middle of it. For all practical purposes, I could hunt a quarter square mile and cover it all. Maybe not corner to corner, but at least straight out, 220 yards each direction. Myself as a bow hunter, especially a traditional bow hunter, I cover a 30-yard circle, and 15 yards each direction. My opportunities are certainly limited, more limited than somebody else's, and I don't want to be dictated what a trophy hunt is, or what a quality deer is. I shot either a pretty decent 2.5-year-old last year, or possibly a 3-year-old. It was a 9-point. I shot it at 4 yards with my trad bow. That does more to get my heart racing than a 150-inch buck would at 150 yards, with a gun in my hand. It's just not the same. I like the challenge of what I do bow hunting, and there's got to be room in the regulations, in my opinion, to not chase any of the different user groups away. There's a lot of big bucks in Michigan, and anybody tells you that there's not needs to look at the other pages that are out there with the bucks that are shot in Michigan. And I'll say that last year, the 3 counties that produced the most record book bucks were not in our APR areas. And they weren't even down in Jackson and Hillsdale. They were more middle of the state there. Saginaw and in that area.
I've been seeing a lot come out of Barron County lately.
Yep. So I'm all for voluntary APRs, and so is Michigan Bowhunters. And I'll say this about Michigan Bowhunters, just so you know, we have no policy on baiting, and we have no policy on antler point restrictions or on one buck. Our policy and our main focus is to push the department to follow Proposal G and manage the herd based on biological science and what's in the best interest of the deer herd for long term, not what's in the best interest of the hunter.
Okay. So a question that pops in my mind real quick is, so you said there's 18 individuals on the deer advisory team currently. Is it a good mix when we're talking the Lower Peninsula? Is it a good mix from around the Lower Peninsula, or is it a little more heavy in, southern Michigan compared to northern Michigan, or, is it a good mix from around the state?
I think it's pretty well mixed. We've got guys that live up in the Midland area. You got Southeast Michigan. You got Southwest Michigan. I know of 3 of us in the Thumb area here. Myself, Rochelle Hubbard, Rob Steinberg. We're all in the Thumb Belt here. Rochelle's up in Tuscola. Rob Steinberg, and he's representing the farming community. He's a farmer that's in there that's experienced quite a bit of crop damage, looking for some answers and some solutions. And he's turned out to be a real asset to the Lower Peninsula DAT. He's over in St. Clair County. So, and I know that our chair is from over in the western side of the state. The co-chair is up in your neck of the woods. She helped with the club country up there. She's a local biologist for some of the club country up there. And so, yeah, and I know there's some people up in the Northwest 13 area. So I think it's a pretty good mix of individuals.
Okay. Yeah, it's just good, because there's a lot of folks that maybe don't have that information or don't know, who comprises of the DAT. So, yeah, that was just curiosity on my behalf. So you've got 18 individuals from, various parts of the state. It sounds like maybe with different, agendas, maybe things that they're more passionate about compared to others. So these meetings, as you guys sit together and sit down and talk and try to come up with a plan. So your ultimate goal, right, is to present things to the NRC. These are the things we would like to see passed for the Lower Peninsula. How do you guys compromise and talk and come up with a solution of what you're going to present to the NRC as your proposals for Lower Peninsula?
at times there's a lot of compromise, and at times there's not. It just depends on the individual and on the topic at hand. Even myself, I'll be the first to admit I'm pretty set in my ways at times. There's things that I just fundamentally, and APRs would be one. I just fundamentally, I can't grasp in my head why somebody who's never going to step foot on my property and hunt thinks they have the right to manage what I can shoot on my own land, with my tag. I just have a hard time grasping that. So that's something that I'm not willing to bend on. But I also look at the biology. When you talk to the biologists nationwide, they had a symposium, and the DMI was given this information, and they talked about it at one of the NRC meetings last June. There was a symposium nationwide, and they all came up with the best recommendation that they thought for CWD on a nationwide level was that advancing the age structure of the deer was going to result in a quicker spread of CWD. It's an emerging science. Whether that's true, I guess none of us can really tell right now, but I'd rather err on the side of caution in the best interest of the herd and be wrong than to do nothing and have Michigan turn into Wisconsin or Colorado. I don't know if you've seen what's going on in those states with CWD, but it's a mess out there. And they essentially did nothing to curb CWD. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I do think there's some merit, though, as I alluded to earlier, with the $1, but not as a standalone regulation. I think if you pair that with some other things, it could make a difference on our antlerless harvest in the southern half of the state here.
Okay. So yeah, sounds like it's probably some interesting conversation at your DAT meeting. So so as a team, what kind of proposals did you guys ultimately agree upon that you were going to turn over to the NRC for, to be up for vote or considered?
The really time crunch this year because what happened last year with the magazine digest getting out and stuff in time. So we had a really short window to discuss these. By the time they put the team together, we passed 2 resolutions onto the department. One of them being reinstatement of the opportunity for the youth and disabled, the Independence and Liberty hunts, to restore that, what they took away last year. And I think it was pretty much unanimous amongst that group to reintroduce that for those individuals. And I'll say that did not come out of the DMI last year. That was a amendment made to the wildlife conservation order last year by one of the commissioners. I'll tell you my thoughts on it. I just tell you my thoughts on it. I'll be 62 this year, and I'm taking my grandkids out hunting, trying to get them going. I take my dad out. I think the best thing that we can do as mentors is lead by example. I would be more than happy to take my grandson out this year and have him shoot a buck of his choice, and myself harvest an antlerless deer just to teach them the importance of it. Why force him to do the work that we should be doing? They'll have plenty of opportunity for that, but that was the right thing to do. And then, like I said, the other proposal that came out of the Lower Peninsula DAT that I did not vote in favor of was the $1. And that's because it was simply a $1. That was all it was going to change. And I think there's more to that conversation than just simply saying, hey, Ohio has $1 and they shoot more does than we do. You got to look at the whole regulation package, not just one piece of it.
Yeah, it's excuse me, when you talk about doe harvest and everything, it's to me it's interesting. And as you said earlier, the data shows when you look at what's currently, presented to hunters, unlimited doe tags and discounted doe tags and all those things, like you said, the actual harvest, though, it's more counties end up shooting bucks than they do more does. I think Dennis, I don't know if you remember, but we went through, the harvest reporting, and I think there was only a couple counties out of the entire state that actually ended up harvesting more does than they did bucks. So, yeah, like you said, Bob, it's more of a hunter mindset. It feels like in this state than anything else. So, tomorrow, so those two things will be voted on tomorrow. Or hopefully the reinstation of a buck tag in the youth and liberty hunt, and then potential one buck tag. That's getting voted on tomorrow.
The one buck tag will not be voted on tomorrow. That's something that's going to go into 2026's conversation. The department did not support it at this time. They're open to more conversation about it. And like I said, due to some things in the statute, our attorney general, or the lawyer on the DNR, believes that in statute, when they refer to deer, and the combo tag was set up by the legislators, not the NRC, and it's going to take a legislative change to turn that into a one buck, one doe tag, or to do away with it. So it wasn't doable for this year. So that won't be voted on tomorrow. The other things that will be voted on tomorrow are the UP. I worked really hard with Jordan Hoover, and I tell you, that guy is nonstop, and he has been busy since last fall. And he's right about the things that he's talking about. If anybody knows what's going on in the Upper Peninsula as a hunter, he does. I'd say he's probably one of the best informed, most informed people up there in the UP advisory team. And we're really hoping that they reinstate the 10-year ban that they had, the 10-year moratorium on antlerless harvest for the bow up in the Lake Superior watershed. I'm sure you've heard from Jordan the negative impacts that's had up there on the buck to doe ratios, the late-born fawns, the extended breeding season for 3 months, our bucks going into the winter, poorly nutritioned. So that should be voted on tomorrow. And we're really hoping that passes and corrects that.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, we get a lot of behind the scenes with Jordan here at Michigan Outdoors Report. So you're absolutely right, and I don't think he's appreciated enough for everything he's doing for the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. There, that dude literally eats, breathes, sleeps deer. So he knows his stuff, and if you follow his page, his personal page, he puts out a lot of good stuff there, talking about carrying capacity and good demonstrations and everything. And sometimes his opinions aren't the most popular, especially when it comes to the predators, and that's the easy way out. But he definitely is the right guy for the job, and he definitely does a tremendous job up there for the UP. So Bob, I want to pick your brain on some hot topic things. Number one, there's been a lot of buzz around bringing back baiting, like you talked about. That seems to be, a popular opinion here in the Lower Peninsula. Talks about, you have to buy a license, if I remember correctly, a $20 license, and then you can begin to bait again. I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
Well, I make a lot of unpopular comments on social media on some of the pages. Everybody blames the DNR, right? The DNR does nothing right. Most of the time when we have issues, it's with the NRC, not with the department. Chad Stewart has asked numerous times to the NRC to reinstate the antlerless harvest up in the Upper Peninsula, but the NRC has not followed through with it, even though the science is there for it. And last year, I don't know if you've seen any of the debacle that happened last year at the NRC meeting. One of the commissioners rode to the meeting with one of the UP stakeholder groups, and he was up there in his chair asking, "Is that what you guys wanted?" That's not the way we're supposed to be managed. That's not the intent of the NRC. And there's a lot of confusion. I see on social media where guys will say, "Well, yeah, it causes disease spread, but if we pay a $20 baiting fee, it doesn't spread disease." Now they're saying that. Well, they're not saying that, because they're two two different entities. The department still stands by their decision to ban baiting, and the $20 bait fee and reinstatement of it is coming from the legislators, who, if they were to follow Proposal G and be bound by Proposal G, they wouldn't be able to make that recommendation, based on what we're seeing. And there's a lot of questions that are unanswered on that, though. I asked some questions that I thought were really relevant during the DMI. And I'm talking about Zone 3 here now in the southern half of Zone 2, where we have real high deer densities. What's more likely to spread disease? All those additional deer on the landscape for the whole year, eating on the soybeans and the corn and sharing their food there, versus 3 months or 4 months of baiting. But there's never been any studies done to tell you that one's a little more likely to spread disease versus the other, So what I think that's something that needs to be talked about. We know that if we bring baiting back, that it's going to bring some hunters back. I can use my hometown here at Lapeer. These were all subdivided since the years that I've been here into these, those 10 acre, they're 330-foot wide, 1,250 foot deep, something like that. And some of them, unless there's acorns on the trees and fallen, there's nothing there for the deer. There's nothing on those properties to keep deer there. And that hurt a lot of people's hunting opportunities because they just didn't have the habitat for deer, and they didn't have a big enough place to put a food plot in. They would do themselves a favor if they would get in and clear cut some of that old growth forest, do some select harvesting and get some more understory in there, because there's no browse underneath in a lot of those areas. So there's things that hunters could do for themselves to help. I personally don't think that the baiting ban is going to go away, because I think the ag department and the cattle industry has a lot more clout than we as hunters do. So
yeah, just common sense to me, honestly. I can't bite my tongue on this one. If you got a deer that's sick, why would you want that thing wandering around looking for food? I think more bait piles would keep them in that core area instead of wandering off looking for, something to eat and possibly spreading that disease.
Right. I'm not opposed either way. I quit baiting long before the bait ban. I used to put some bait out. I don't anymore. And that was when I was starting to get in that time where I was trying to find more mature bucks, and the only thing that was coming into the bait piles were does and 1.5-year-old bucks, and it wasn't what I was looking for at the time. I know it would help a lot of guys out. It would help the kids out a little bit.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see what happens. And I know a lot of other states are kind of throwing up their hands when it comes to CWD, that there's not anything they're going to be able to do about it. And let's be honest, we don't have a bait ban here in Michigan unless you're hunting state land, because we got an 80% non-compliance rate on those hunting private property. They're still selling just as much bait now as they were before the bait ban. The only ones that are being negatively affected by it are the state land hunters and those that'll abide by the law.
Yeah. Yes, the only time I've ever really used it is hunting right here in Wayne County where I live. It's suburbia big time, and they get so much pressure. It's you don't really see them, and that's the main reason I ever used bait was to be able to see the deer. Now state land, some private land hunting that I do, those are all that's all near ag and stuff. I don't need to do that, but here where I'm hunting, it's anything to get an edge.
Right. So I don't know what's going to happen long term baiting. And like I said, I'm not going to be disappointed if they reinstate it, and I'm not going to be disappointed if they. A lot of our members would like them to reinstate it. Some of our older members, guys got used to it. I think it'll definitely result in the harvest of some more deer. In the high density areas, but I don't know at what cost. Because with this CWD, if they know they can't stop it, at best they can slow it down. And we don't know what slowing it down looks like. That's the other question that I asked. Does slowing it down give us 5 years before we're Wisconsin, or 55 years before we're Wisconsin with our prevalence rates? Nobody knows the answer to that because we just don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting to see now. It seems like the reports of CWD have slowed down a little bit over the last few years, but yeah, it'll be interesting long term. I haven't watched too much on Colorado, but I know Wisconsin, they're having some major issues with CWD over there, it seems like.
Colorado is primarily they got a super high prevalence rate in one of their mule deer herds, and they're saying it's going to be 100% loss on that particular mule deer herd in the next few years.
Wow.
We don't know why it's so high there, spiked so high there compared to other areas of the state. I don't know if it's something to do with the soils or the climate that keeps them prion more active. I'm not sure what the reason is. But.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hopefully, we're like you said, hopefully we're more in that 55 year before it, and hopefully science, we can figure it out and maybe have some answers down the road. So, so Bob, question for you too. This is one that I've always wondered. As you've noted, the deer density in southern Michigan is much higher as opposed once you get into northern lower. Has there been any discussion, even amongst the deer advisory team, the DNR, about maybe establishing different regulations for different portions of the state? Up here by me, I go home to Lapeer and I see a lot more deer, especially just does everywhere. We're up here, it doesn't seem like the numbers are, the density is as prevalent. I mean, I know there's still an issue. The buck to doe ratio is still too high here, but have you guys had any discussion about that, about maybe establishing some different zones with different rules and regulations?
There has definitely been talk amongst the deer advisory team for that. One of the things that we keep running into is the state and the COs want consistent regulations for easeability of enforcement. I personally think that the two biggest issues that they need to solve for the deer management in the state is access. If you lay a map down and all of the really super high deer density areas in the state in zone 3 and southern portion of zone 2, they're all on private property. We can't harvest deer that we don't have access to. So that needs to be solved. And I also don't think they'll solve it until just what you said. I would like them to move the line right now that separates zone 2 and 3, bump that line farther to the north, including all of the high deer density areas in the southern half of zone 2, southern portion of zone 2. Make that one management unit with one specific set of regulations. The northern half of the lower with a different set of regulations, and the upper peninsula with different regulations up there. Other states do that where they have different opening days, different season lengths, depending on the densities and whatnot. And I think that's the best thing long-term that could happen here in Michigan is to manage by density levels and habitat. I'm not hearing you.
There we go. Helps if I unmute myself. Well, that's good to know, because it did seem kind of strange that they're just blanket regulations for the entire northern lower, where it's definitely different deer densities and hunting styles and all that. So, yeah, Dennis, did you have any more questions or anything for Bob tonight, or?
No, I think that pretty much covered it. I'm learning as I'm sitting here listening. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't know, but I'm definitely glad I sat in on this one.
Yeah, yeah. So Bob, are you going to? I already know the answer to this, but you're going to the meeting tomorrow?
I'll be at the meeting tomorrow, and I'm actually giving a conservation award tomorrow away during the director's report of the meeting. It's top secret who the recipient is, but I'll be giving an award away down there tomorrow, and then I'm gonna get ready. I'll be up on a spring bear hunt in Juniper, New Brunswick at the end of the month. So, and I drew an Idaho elk tag again this year, so I'll be out there again this year. So.
Awesome.
It's nice to be retired.
Yeah, that'll be fun. You know, if you ever need someone to tag along with you on those hunts, I might know a guy.
Yeah, me.
Okay, I guess I know two. So I guess Bob, one last thing. When we talk about these NRC meetings and participation, this is something we talk about quite a bit. But what's your viewpoint on hunter participation at the NRC meetings?
I'll answer that the same way I addressed our members at our annual banquet back in April. The future of our I'm going to say bow hunting in this case, and all of our deer hunting is going to be decided by those that show up. You know, and if you just think that somebody else is going to do it for you, you're going to get just what you deserve. If you're not an advocate for the things that you believe in, there's more non-hunters out there and a growing list of anti-hunters every year. And we don't show up in numbers to represent our lifestyle, our way of life. It very much could disappear from us, you know. So the participation is good. I'm going to tell you that I don't agree with all of the viewpoints. You know, there's pushes for things that I don't believe in, as APRs that I speak about. You know, and there's a lot of people that have gotten up there in the past and spoke about them. But at the end of the day, we're all on the same team. We've got to be respectful of each other and find compromises and solutions to get us to where we need to be for the resources sake, not for hunters' sake. You know, I don't believe for a minute that we have deer hunters running out of the state of Michigan to hunt elsewhere and not buying Michigan tags. There's probably a few. And those are the guys that are just really hardcore, looking for 5-year-old, 200-inch tails. The average hunter doesn't care about that. If they shot a 2.5-year-old 8-point, he'd be happy as hell, you know, and it might even be their first one. What people don't realize when you go to the NRC meeting, right? There's maybe 30 people in the room, or sometimes more than that, depending on the topic. That is such a small fraction of the hunters in the state. The average hunter in the state takes his bow out in September, shoots some arrows, goes and shoots, and takes his gun out a couple days before gun season. It's more about camaraderie and getting away and being in the woods than it is wanting to shoot a trophy deer. There's diehard guys, and I got a lot of respect for those guys that pass deer after deer after deer, wanting to give it another year. But most of those guys are hunting great private land. They got their deer named. They've got sheds off of them from year after year after year. That's not really representative of most of the hunters in this state. Most hunters don't have 400 private acres that they can hunt and manage and pass up there like that. If they're hunting private, even my own private piece that I have, it's 20 acres. I don't hold any monster deer on it. I'll shoot whatever God sends in front of me.
Absolutely. Well, hey Bob, wish you the best of luck. We want to thank you also. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I should have refrained. I shouldn't say whatever comes out in front of me, but I'm selective, but not.
Shoot what makes you happy.
Right, exactly. If it gets my heart going, it's good enough for me.
Yeah, they're all trophies, man. Every one of them.
Amen to that. Well, Bob, we want to thank you for your time tonight. We also want to thank you for all your work that you've done, with the Michigan Bowhunters Association and just everything they've done for the sport. Also for your work with the Deer Advisory Team. You know, having talked with Jordan and seeing the insides of what that what that team has in front of them and what they have to accomplish. And as you said, the timelines and just everything, everybody serving on those teams, thank you for stepping up and being the voice of the Michigan hunter. So thank you, Bob. Again, if you guys want to check out Michigan Bowhunters Association, give them a Google. Their website will pop up, and you can see where they're going to be at, what the events are, and if you want to join and become a member, that information will be there for you too. So make sure you join us again. We back next Wednesday, Dennis?
Yes, sir. With Dennis from the Double D Ranch Foundation.
Double D Ranch. So awesome. We're looking forward to that. Yeah. So I think I'm not 100% sure, but we might do a reaction live to the vote tomorrow. It won't be tomorrow, but just a reaction post vote coming out of tomorrow with the NRC vote. So we'll see if we can line that up, Jordan, and maybe we can get somebody from the Lower Peninsula DAT to come on and share their thoughts and the voting process and how it all went down. So, Bob, once again, thank you for joining us tonight. It was a pleasure to talk to you and gain your insight on everything. And we'll see you all back next Wednesday for sure here at Michigan Outdoors Report.
Thanks